process of applying to creative and performing art colleges, and we're so excited to welcome him today. So thank you so much, Scott, for being here.
Of course. Hi friends, how are you doing? Good to see you. Many familiar faces, some new faces. I have to always just start. I love PSO. Having been a former conservatory director, the work you guys do, the volunteer hours, the resources you provide, truly, it's invaluable for the school. So thank you for bringing me in to chat to you all today, but also just bravo and brava to you all for all the work you guys are doing for the amazing students here at OCSA. Before we get started, I know the OCSA world, inside and out. I'm an alum of OCSA, back from 1882, and I was a director of musical theater here from 2017 to 2020. So I truly love speaking to the OCSA families because there's a shorthand here. I know exactly the hours your kids are keeping. I know the passion, I know the intellect, and I know the fear of the students here at OCSA. So I really love talking specifically to the OCSA families about college processes and what you can sort of expect from this. That being said, two sort of, rules of engagement today. First one is our goal, as we talk about college, is to lower the temperature. The goal today is to lower the temperature on this. I am not interested in adding kerosene to the fire, yeah? That is genuinely my intention. So if at some point you start to feel a little riled up about a topic about college, which is perfectly natural, just remember the intention is to lower that temperature. And the second is, we're not solving it all today. We are not solving it all today. I'm going to give you lots of information. Some of it may even be overwhelming, but I called the business the Creative College Journey for a reason, because it is a journey. And it is one you sort of have to take step by step, and you really can't get ahead of it. Partly because of the timeline, partly just because that is what happens. So trust that it is a journey. You don't have all the answers, and you're not going to have all the answers until your kid is actually at college. And even then, new questions will arise. So it is a journey, so be aware of that. So really today, what I want to focus on is, why is it different for a creative applicant? So this is the idea of any student who's interested in a major or a creative field or an artistic field of some kind. And why is it just different? It is. Do not let them fool you otherwise. It is different. First off, there is usually some kind of an audition, artistic portfolio, something extra that you have to do. So on top of all of the regular things you have to do for a college application, that may be tests, resumes, letters of rec, filling out the application, the essays, your GPA, all of that, it's and. It's that plus the audition or the portfolio or the interview, right? So that, right off the bat, it's different. And because of that, a lot of artistic students also have a different rubric. So the sort of general statistics you'll hear about a college aren't necessarily going to apply to the creative student, right? I look at a school like Pace University in New York City. It's generally a relatively easy school to get in academically. They have an admit rate about 80%. But if you look at their commercial dance department or their musical theater department, it's a very different admit rate. So you have different expectations with different programs depending on what you're doing. The other thing that's massively different for a creative applicant is the timeline. The timeline tends to be earlier than regular admissions. So not only do you do more, you gotta do it sooner. Isn't that fun? So it is a slightly earlier timeline. And sometimes those timelines aren't as well publicized because they're smaller programs or niche impacted programs. So keeping that in mind. So those are all like the logistic things. Why is it different? But ultimately, why I do this work, why I love this work, is a deeper reason. Why it's different for a creative applicant. It's one thing to get a rejection or an acceptance based on statistics, based on a GPA, based on your test score, based on a general application that's all on paper, or I'm dating myself. That's all on the computer screen. It's very different to get an acceptance or a rejection at 18 when you step into a room, deliver a monologue, and then get a no. It's very different to share your soul via a piece of writing, via a piece of art, via a piece of music, and then get a no. So there is something that is really precious about this process, and that we want to protect our students' creative autonomy. We want to protect our students' ability to still want to create. If they've been at OCSA for 4 or 6 years, we don't want a no from a school to squash that. Because what's hard for a lot of these students, and I know this because I was that student, is that if many students sort of know 10 schools, and usually they're really fancy schools. And they may not know much about them, but they know they're pretty good. And what often happens in the translation for these young people who don't know what they don't know is that they presume, if I don't get into X program, then my entire career has ended before it started. And that is simply not true, which is why creative students need particular shepherding, so that they can really start to see the bigger picture, right? So how do we do that? I use this quote as a starting spot with every family I work with. And it's Arthur Ashe, amazing tennis player, awesome, sports. Don't usually bring up sports metaphors at OCSA, but today we're gonna OCSA sports. Start where you are. And it sounds so simple, but it is the key to everything. Where are you right now? Do not get ahead of yourself on this journey. Start where you're at. Literally, what grade is the student in? What are their interests? What are they doing? How are they spending their time? Getting the information about what's happening in the right now. It's key. Use what you have. This is an inventory. What do you have in your life that sort of will help you understand and move through this process? Now, you're at OCSA. Some of you may be at work on a Zoom call. You being at OCSA, there are tons of resources here. Tons. You want to lean into those resources. Those are your conservatory directors, your counselors, your faculty, the families a few years ahead of you who have already gone through the process. You do want to lean into what you have. Often, when we get overwhelmed about the process, we go like, I don't know what to do. Actually start with what's around you and use the things that are near you. And the last one is do what you can. And I love saying this to my OCSA families. Do what you can. This is, well, I'll give you a little example of what I mean by do what you can. For whatever reason, with the artistic folk, when a student says, hey, mom and dad, I really want to study musical theater in college, or I really want to study animation in college, often the parent reaction is a little hyperbolic and goes one of two ways. The first one is the armor comes on, Excalibur gets drawn, and it's come hell or high water, we're going to get my kid up Artist Mountain. No matter how many student loans it takes, we are going to get this kid to become a capital A artist. Or we get sort of a doomsday prophecy of like, well, if you study jazz studies with an emphasis in saxophone, you're destined to be destitute, broke, drinking gin for breakfast, right? There's sort of this like two sides of the coin. This absolute, we have to go battle for everything, and or we're gonna be in complete ruin if we go down this path. Why doesn't that happen if someone says, hey, mom and dad, I want to study economics? Like, right? There's this thing with creatives and this idea, and what really I found happens is we're getting ahead of ourselves. Is that we're trying to find some guarantees. some surefire ideas of like, well, if my kid goes down this path, how can you guarantee that they're going to be successful? If my kid decides to study musical theater, how can I guarantee they're going to make it on Broadway? Or if my kid studies animation, how can I guarantee they're going to get a job at Pixar? And here's the reality. No one can guarantee that. No one, period, full stop. So we're connecting the college experience with security for a job. Now I understand, yes, learning, growing is helpful. Building networks and building connections can help for the career piece, but that's not actually why we send students to college, or at least it's not why I believe is the strongest reason to send kids to college. I love this. This is a great book. If you're a book nerd about this topic, Ready or Not, Dr. Madeline Levine. It's a beautiful book about how can we sort of shepherd students, especially in this moment, you know, these students who are post-pandemic babies, who have dealt with a lot through their educational journey. How can we help them become better adults, more successful, fruitful adults? Career advisors must help students realize that choosing the perfect major or program will not give students the specific knowledge in any occupation that they will need to be successful. College isn't job prep. Kind of period, full stop. They need to see formal higher education as a preparatory phase of continuous, lifelong knowledge acquisition and skill building that is accomplished by a variety of means and media. So, simply put, the reason why you're going to college is to start the next step. It is not the end game. It is the first step of the journey that will unveil itself. So, for me, it then goes, well, then what are we searching for? If it's not job security, then why am I paying that tuition bill? What is the point of this? And for the creative and the artist, and frankly, I think everyone, but for this conversation, we'll say for the creatives and the artists, college is really helping build these three qualities: resilience, persistence, and adaptability. If you want job security, and if you want a student to sort of survive the many changing industries, entertainment and otherwise, these are actually the skills they're needing. And this is what we want to focus on, even at the application level, is how can the process of application build resilience? Resilience, the idea of being able to take hits, and Lord knows the hits keep on coming. Persistence, if you get hit, how do you take the next right step? How do you continue forward momentum? And adaptability, that's the ability to change course, whether that because the goal changes or whether that because there's an obstacle, right? If there's an obstacle between you and the goal, do you go through it, around it, over it, under it? These are the key ingredients for success moving forward. And what I love about this is truly what I think college does better than anything. This is what I love about this work. It's what I love about helping students find really good matched places for their personality, for their needs, for their goals, is that, yeah, life will throw some curveballs. Things will change, paths will change, career trajectories will change. I'm actually curious, show of hands, how many people are currently working in a field that aligns with their college degree? And how many people are not working in alignment with their college degree? Yeah. So it's another sort of thing, we can actually let go of some of this fear piece. And why I bring this up is this will help release some of the white knuckling of the college admissions process. If we white knuckle the process, I see a lot of strength. And the goal is to sort of, there's many ways to sort of answer these questions. Now, I do want to just sort of like talk through some more nuts and bolts about the college application process. I'm sort of curious, because I do like to just sort of know who's in the room. Do I have any families of seniors in the room? Yeah? Juniors? Sophomores? Freshmen? And I dare to ask it, any middle school families? Get out, it's not time yet. It's not time. I'm kidding. You'll hang out. But also, it's not time yet.
Never too early.
Yeah, take the information in, but no actions required. But what I love to sort of like break down, and what part of my job is when a family hires me, or if I work with a school or a student, is just literally breaking down the process. What's going to happen? What do you need to do to be successful within an application? Because I always say doing things means doing things. So there's a process, there are things that have to get done, there's a checklist. And what I've sort of, and this is broad, there are other things within this, but there are sort of three key things for a creative student that will happen. And I'd say two of them kind of fall within logistics, literally the application management. Two of them are sort of within the artistic or expression field. And then two of them are sort of through mindset and emotional. How do you walk through this journey? And so, I feel like I'm on a boat. Does everyone hear this, the creaking? That's a little better. I'm gonna take one step off.
Seagulls going in the background.
Yeah. It's a nice, Pirates of Penzance over here. I'm gonna step back here. So things are sort of identified. What's sort of interesting, every family I work with, and this is sort of like, use what you have. Every family sort of has innate strengths and weaknesses within these three categories, right? I've got some real type A students or type A families who like coast through the logistics. They will get through Common App like it's nothing. They will build their own spreadsheets with all the due dates and all the things, and they'll cross-reference all the things, right? We've also got the artistic piece. There are other students and families who are really strong about supporting, either because they have great coaches or their training is at a particular lane, there's a comfort there, and or expression, the ability to sort of be self-expressed, authentically self-expressed, can be sort of easier. And then the other one is the mindset and the emotional piece of this. Riding the roller coaster without white-knuckling, freaking out, losing your mind, losing your life savings. There's, and some families are really good about sort of finding an even keel, what I always say, dispassionate decision making. And at this stage, part of it is like really identifying for you, where do we rock and roll? And where do we maybe need a little bit of support? It might be across the board, but often it's sort of identifying and understanding. Things to sort of look at that I find to be really important. The first piece is like researching and getting college information. How do you filter through the thousands of colleges, throughout the US to find your list? How do you understand your students' goals, needs, wants, and the budget? How do you determine that? What I always say, finding stoked matches, finding a list that, yes, there may be sort of a force rank, like, ooh, I really love this school, but if you've got a list of 10 schools, your students should be stoked about any one of them, regardless of the admit rate. And so if you build out a list where, hey, if I get into school number 1, I'm thrilled. If I get into school number 5, I'm thrilled. If I get into school number 10, I'm thrilled. Really does sort of cover your bases. And then my big thing, and this is what I do constantly, is balancing a list. Especially if a student is going after some heavy reaching, low admit schools, Ivy adjacent, or these really, really impacted artistic programs. You just want to make sure that you've got a cross section of options. Super reaches, which I sort of identify as under 10% chance of admit. Reaches, which I would put 30% and under. Targets, which I put between 30 and 70%, depending on the student profile. And then you want to have some likelies, which are like 70% and up admit rates. So that the mission can get accomplished and you can sort of lower the temperature on that. Truly, I ask this of students all the time, their biggest fear, absolute biggest fear, is that they won't get in anywhere. That is literally their biggest fear, and you can nip that in the bud by balancing your list. Yeah. Oh, I see a question. The four, yeah. So I say super reaches are 10% and less. I say reaches are 30% and less. I say target, like a nice target, somewhere where you're going to be a pretty solid fit, anywhere between 30 and 70%, give or take. And then likelies, often referred to in the industry as a safety. I hate that word because it just is so demeaning of the institution. You know, to call Cal State Fullerton a safety, I'm just like, no, it's just a school that's easier to get into. You know? So that's a likely. Those are the terms that I use. But it's a key piece of this is how do you build out a list that makes sense for your kid based on goals, based on needs. And then the sort of like boring part is like the application management. Like, how are you going to go through this? Organizing requirements, building a workflow, sort of a timeline. When can you get this done? I always say applications, a really great application, usually takes anywhere from 60 to 100 hours. Now, for the OCSA kid, I'm like, that's cakewalk. Look at the hours they put into a show, or they put into a gallery, or like, that's actually not that hard for the OCSA student, but it is about building out a workflow. Managing deadlines, because truly, for many schools, if you miss the deadline, they'll let you submit, and they might still take your application fund, but it's a great way to not be considered. It's a great way to get a rejection. And then also communicating with colleges. Is your student able to write an email to an admissions rep? Don't ask them to make a phone call, because they won't. They won't. Get on the phone? No. They might text and maybe an email. So those are sort of the logistic hurdles that I often find with families, and it's really realizing that's part of the process. From the artistic point of view, you're really dealing with identifying if a student is interested in a niche program, a music program, a theater program, something that has an additional artistic supplement, go and find out what is required. It's figuring out what is needed. You know, for my musical theater folks, it's pretty much, you need 2 to 3 songs, you need 2 to 3 monologues, you need to do a dance, you need to do a wild card, you need to have a resume, right? So it's building out those needs. But within the schools, one school may only require 1 song. One school may only require, you know, a contemporary and a classical monologue. So you have to sort of be able to differentiate what is required so that your student can get ready for it. You can understand why, in that case, if a student starts research 3 weeks before the deadline, we get into trouble. Finding and coaching that rep, filming pre-screens, you know, literally, how do you present this material? And then the really fun part, the audition and callback calendaring, which may include travel. Particularly for my performing arts students, I would say sort of dance, musical theater, acting, this can be a really tough part of the journey. Let's say you apply to 30 schools, and best case scenario, all 30 schools are like, great, we want you to come audition. You then need to schedule 30 auditions, and they may be all over the nation. So it's one of those things that can sort of, and it all happens between January and February. I don't know if you traveled to Michigan in February, but it's not that cute. But it's about figuring that piece of this out. So know that that is another key piece of this. The other big challenge I find for students is the written expression. And that is almost every application does require some form of writing. If you're using Common App, it's the 650-word personal statement. You can literally read the prompts now. They are out there and they rarely change from year to year. There are 8 prompts, and the beauty of the Common App essay can literally be anything, because the last prompt is, tell us a topic of your own choosing. Right? But if you want to sort of understand what schools are looking at, you can actually go see. But this has become a really key piece of the application process, and it's a style of writing that many students aren't actually very comfortable with, because it's speaking about themselves. It's, how do you humble brag? How do you put pertinent information without it sounding like a resume? How do you tell a story? This is where the OCSA kids have a wild advantage, because they're natural storytellers. But making sure that, that they are able to write a great personal statement, finding ways to reduce, recycle, and reuse essays, and yes, you can. Copy editing. For my type A parents, notice I say copy editing, not rewriting. Just like to put that out there. And then authentic expression. Making sure that whatever essay is written sounds like them, feels like them, has their essence. Last part, and this is more I should probably get my therapy license, but I am not an active therapist. So important for these students, managing expectations and mindset and cheerleading. Really managing expectations. A lot of students have bigger eyes in their stomachs in terms of application bandwidth. I want to apply the little bit of FOMO. I got to apply there, and all of a sudden the list balloons to 25, 30 schools. Can they actually do that? Is that actually a realistic goal? Especially if they want to be as active as they want to be their senior year at OCSA. So managing a list from that point of view. Measuring twice, cutting once, that means really trying these programs on, really taking your time in the research piece of this. Same thing in the decision making. Once you get the schools, trying them on, not getting to a rash decision. You will see this is actually the moment for any senior families. I actually say this is the hardest part of the process, literally right now, to decision making. Because you're waiting for results, and you wanting desperately to get it behind you. And you don't have all the information yet, so you can't really make a decision. And then financial limitations and parameters, being able to discuss how much is too much. Having candid conversations with your family about the finance of college. And last but not least, staying in your lane. And I say this for the particularly, overbearing is such a strong word, but strong-willed parents, staying in your lane. And what I say about this, I always use an 80-20 reference. This process really should be led 80% by the student and 20% of support by you. That tends to be a pretty nice bandwidth. If a student can't handle 80% of this, they're probably not fully ready for the college experience. And that's why I put it out there. This should be led by them. There are ways to support them. They should not do this alone. But it's finding this balance and sort of staying in your lane. Question?
So we have a senior who graduated last year, and she was having troubles with the process. But we found that we were asking maybe once, twice a week. That was stressing her out. She didn't talk to us about it, but it was stressing her out. So we started a rule in the house. Monday nights, we have 20 minutes that we can talk about it, nothing for the rest of the week. And that helped.
Beautiful. And again, it's finding the familial pathways towards engagement and understanding, because you're exactly right. It can get overwhelming for the student, but it is about finding this sort of 80-20. How can they get some independence while also realizing they're not probably paying for it? So you do get a vote, and you should be a part of the process. And that there needs to be connection throughout. And then the last piece is the mindset and cheerleading. Managing rejections and acceptances. It's really important. I feel this is like why I started this business and why I'm here. A student needs to hear from multiple people that their worth is not tied up in an acceptance to a program, that their career potential is not tied up to a yes or a no from a school. They have to hear it from us. Literally, words from your mouth, my mouth. Call me. I will get on a call, free of charge, happily, to be like, it's okay. They have to hear it. Finding the joy and the opportunity of this moment, I actually do think there's a great opportunity for connection with your student as you go through this process. There's great learning about what your student is about in this process. Community versus competition. This is actually particularly key here at OCSA. I see some counselors and admin in the back. Just close your ears really quick. OCSA is a brutal place for the college admissions process. And it's not malicious by any stretch. It is just a brutal place by the fact that you're surrounded by so many talented, smart, high-achieving humans. So the compare and despair here at this school about the college process is really tricky. So with that, part of our goal is also to name, we're community, not competition. It's not about fighting for the one spot at one school. It's actually about, we're all on our own journeys and we're finding our right matches. And then with that also, allowing students the space, especially in this sphere, they can get really hyped up and trying to build some dispassionate decision making. Being able to sort of like lower that temperature, look at the facts, and that can be from lots of different angles, financial, curricular, geographic, what have you, and making the best decisions possible. So those are just some of the things that come up within the college process. There's many more, but keep in mind, like, where are you naturally strong? Where do you need support? And then with that, help your students find that support. One key ingredient I find for the creative student that I just think is sort of fun and it's an opportunity, and it's often missed. In our world, if I say, I want to be an actor, the immediate lane to success means, well, you should probably get an EGOT and you better be a series regular on a TV show, right? Something to that effect. We go straight to the apex of industry. But that may not be why your student is putting the hours they are in the art form. So it's actually really important to sort of clock that. Now with this, I actually want to pool this crowd. We're going to walk through these different sort of drivers. And I want you to identify for yourself, what kind of a creative are you? Now I always get a mom who's like, I'm not talented. I don't do arts. Don't make me. And I'd like to just point, I asked, how are you creative, not talented? If you're here today, you're creative. You support the arts. You're a part of the arts. So I want you to actually answer for yourself. The quickest way to get in a fight with a teenager is to tell them what their creative drivers are. One of the easiest ways to talk with your student is ask them, what are your creative drivers? Hey, guess what mine are? It's a much easier way to sort of connect on this topic. But I'm going to go through these. Okay, artistry. Wanting to get as good as technically possible at the art form. Means for the sheer love of the game, wanting to get as good as you can within the art form. Amusement. You love the community, the crowd. It's just fun. I can't imagine, I would rather do this than play video games. Industry. I want to get paid cash money in exchange for my artistic skill. Cash money. Please note, industry and artistry are separate drivers, right? I know a lot of very happy artists who don't make a dime on their art, and and you can turn on Netflix and see some questionable talent making a mint. Right? So, but which is driving this? Which is driving? Transferable skills. The ability to take this creative work and move it somewhere else. Move it into education, move it into entrepreneurship, move it into law, medicine, what have you. Life enrichment, I call this the Dear Diary category. This is where you process the world by doing art, right? You understand the world a little bit better. It creates organization within the chaos. And then activism, you want to change the world in some way through your art, right? So just show of hands, I'm just sort of curious. You can have more than one. Some might be like full tilt, some might be a little bit. How many people identified within artistry, wanting to get really good at the art? Yeah. Amusement. Yeah. Industry. Cash, money. Transferable skills. Yeah. Life enrichment. Yeah. And activism. Sweet. I love this conversation because every time I do this, it's always wildly different hands. And yet, for whatever reason, when we approach actors or musicians or dancers, we often sort of think of it as a monolith. Like that everyone's goal is Broadway, or that everyone's goal is industry. And it may not be. And when you identify this, you maybe have a better chance of finding institutions that also support different aspects of this, right? If you're all about amusement and life enrichment, Juilliard is a flippin' horrible place to go to school. Horrible, right? Because they're all about artistry and industry, right? So it is about, if there is this need for artistry and transferable skills, well then where's that BFA program where you can double major in something else? Right? These are the things and they're not going to look down on it. We're looking for matches, and this is a great way to sort of help find institutional matches accordingly. The other thing, I'm going to go through this a little bit. You have this on the back of your little handout. I don't know why I said it like that, but handout. Handout. It's a nice handout. College planning, as you're building lists, it's just really think about the conversation leading to it. Most students, and often some families, they sort of start at the top of the pyramid. They're like, I want to go to Juilliard and NYU and UCLA, because those are the 3 schools I've heard of. Right? They sort of just go with what they know. Makes sense, it's perfectly natural, perfectly normal. What we actually want to do is we want to start a deeper conversation. Students actually need to understand what even is college. Many students have no clue what college even is. I had a great student, Jordan Spina. Shout out Jordan Spina if anyone knows Jordan. He's at Texas State studying musical theater, fabulous program. He went through this whole process, a little white knuckled, but like he did great. He got to Texas State, and I got the best email from him about 3/4 of the way through his first semester. He was like, wow, Mr. Barnhart, it's just more school. And for him, it was like this epiphany. I was like, yeah, that's what we're doing. It's 4 more years of school, right? They need to understand that this is what you're paying for. You're paying for a degree, knowledge, and it's a place to grow up. But it's not some magical unicorn land that's going to make their dreams come true. It's 4 more years of school. When there's a baseline understanding of what college is, what are those goals that they have? Lifelong goals, creative goals. What are they bringing to the table? What's that inventory? Once you have that, then it's the financial talk. How much is too much? What can they expect? I always bring this one up because what I've found, and this can be such a tricky space, without this conversation, this is where dreams can get shattered. I've seen families who will go through the entire process and they'll sort of avoid the financial conversation, and the kid will just like get in. They'll go through the audition. They'll get into the admission, and it's not until April of their senior year that they find out, oh, it's not viable financially. That's when it can really become a dream crusher. Versus knowing well ahead, here's our cap, here's our limit, so that when you can still apply to that school that's higher tuition, but we understand as a family, if it doesn't get to this marker, it's not viable. They can get on board with that. But if it becomes a surprise at the end of the process, yikes, my guys. So having that conversation, then getting into sort of the shopping fun part. What are the wants? What are the buckets? I really want a small school. I want a school on the East Coast. I want, a school out of state. I want to perform every day. Whatever the case may be, talking about that. And when you go up there, you sort of built an Amazon keyword search for your colleges. You're like, oh, I can find schools, and you can identify when you look at a program pretty quickly, oh, this matches what we're looking for, this doesn't match what we're looking for, right? So keep that in mind. And I'm going to start to open this up. I think we're good on time, right? Relatively? Yeah. Just generally speaking, sophomores and freshmen, middle schoolers, ignore all of them, no. Sophomore and freshmen, really key, enjoy high school. One of the best ways to be a great applicant is to have proof of record that you were a great student in high school, that you enjoyed, that you participated, that you engaged. So really just be mindful, enjoy high school, be in shows, be a part of things, get into clubs, try different things, really key. Consider course selection, particularly if there's some interest in selectivity as a part of your journey. If this is about academics, really understanding how can you get the most rigor for the most academic success. So that part of that, considering your course selection, is maybe choosing one AP rather than 85. If that's going to be a better success ratio for your student. Consider summer plans, finding an activity, a job, an internship, and again, ideally one they enjoy. Start self-evaluation and inventory. What are your interests, values, and strengths? Begin the financial clarity conversation. And I also just love, for families, one of the easiest tactics you can do, go visit a college. That does not mean you have to do like the great college tour of 2025 to 2028. This is just, you can literally go to Chapman, Cal State Fullerton, Saddleback, UCLA, USC, Occidental, and all of a sudden you would get really widely different experiences of what a college campus feels like. So you can really start, and you can take that information and be like, oh, my kid really likes a smaller campus. My kid really likes a big research university. Whatever the case may be, casually getting them exposed to what a college campus feels like can be really, really useful. My juniors, also enjoy high school. First line of business, enjoy high school. Begin answering these pyramid questions, setting goals. Right now is really a great time to begin the list building. Your students probably have a strong idea of even some area of this that they're really interested in. So I love having a list built, I say close to final list, by May or June at the end of junior year. So that you're launching into summer, able to sort of slow burn getting materials together. Begin spreadsheets and researching colleges, talk to seniors, hear the buzz. If you're interested in taking the SAT or ACT, by all means. We are moving into a world where certain colleges are returning back to mandatory testing. So being sort of mindful of the schools that those are. I'm looking at you, Cornell. Many schools are still test optional or test blind, including the UCs and Cal States. But just be mindful, some schools are moving back to test mandatory. So you just want to make sure if schools like that are of interest, that a test is taken. Inventory existing artistic supplement options, plan summer activities, including visiting schools, read the Common App essay prompts, and have a preliminary close to final list by the end of May. Right? So those are just tasks you can start to do. That is not overwhelming. Just one step after the other.
Question from online.
Yeah.
If the testing is not mandatory, is it better to still take them?
My general rule of thumb, others can disagree with me, I think it's worth taking it once. I say for students who are really after heavy artistic schools or programs, the test really isn't going to change much. But there are some spaces where financial aid can open up because of having taken a test. And there is often sort of options to not share a test score. So I usually say yes, if for some reason the student is absolutely, it's going to be complete torture to take the SAT. They do not test well. They do not want to take this test. They refuse to take this test. It's not the hill I would die on. Especially if you start to know what schools are taking test scores or not. So that's my general cliff notes. Yeah.
Something we discovered, we have an older one who's already been through college. The PSAT is the most important, in my opinion, of all the tests. Because not only is it practice for the PSAT and practice for the SAT, but it's also the national merit qualifier. And that opens up so many schools and so many scholarship opportunities. We're talking full rides. For example, OU, University of Oklahoma, it's a 5-year scholarship, fully paid. So if you have a student who would enter with their APs as a first semester junior, that 5 years will take them through their grad school.
Yeah.
So, I mean, it's a very important test. Please, don't overlook that. Do yourselves a favor.
I actually wholeheartedly agree. Taking the PSAT is great. It's also, for the question that was just asked, it's also a great barometer for how does the student fare within the test. And maybe will help you decide whether or not taking the SAT or ACT is vital. These are some just rules of engagement during the college season that I found to be particularly helpful on the OCSA campus. In no particular order, this is great for the students. Your friends need support, not advice or comparison. Realizing that what often happens, especially if a student is sort of ahead in the process, and one student is not ahead of the process, and they're freaking out, the student will be like, well, my college coach said, and it just like adds kerosene to the fire. But be of support with your community. The same goes with parent communications, right? Hold space to celebrate wins and grieve losses. And that's on both ends of the spectrum. If you're really taking on a hard loss, give space for that, and vice versa, don't rain on someone else's parade. And if you're running that parade, also be mindful that other people are maybe going through a really hard moment in this process. You don't need to share with everyone, but sharing with no one is not the answer either. So find your community that you can walk through this process with. This is actually particularly important for the students. The weirdest thing happens at OCSA. When I came here to work, it was the weirdest thing. These kids spend months and years training for this college moment. And as they get into decision time or even callback time, no one says a word. And they're all just walking around on eggshells, so scared that someone's gonna get an advantage or an edge over someone else. And it's bonkers, you guys. It's bonkers. Again, I don't need you to telegraph everything, but make sure you've got community that you can share this process with. They work too hard to not be able to share it. Take responsibility for the energy you bring into the room. This is just good human advice, just be mindful of where you're entering conversations. Are you bringing a really harsh energy to this process, or are you actually open-minded? Are you white-knuckling or not? Practice excellence and professionalism now. This is a great reminder for the students. This is the start of their professional journey. However that may turn, but we do want them to do good work. And I think that's fair. And this is just good in terms of like the rumor mill. If you wouldn't say it directly to the person, don't say it to anyone else. Generally good advice here at Camp OCSA. So again, what this is all leading back to, and I hope you just sort of take away, if nothing else, the college application process and going to college. And I also like to name, I'm equal opportunity. I love community college. I love state schools. I love reach schools. I love straight to industry options. I'm interested in students engaging with post-high school activities that align with them, that are going to build resilience, persistence, and adaptability. So keep an open mind and look at the multiple options in front of you. We as the adults in the room actually have more sway over this process than we give ourselves credit for. So keeping in mind, if you're feeling that white knuckling, take a breath and just focus on, is this happening? Are they building resilience, persistence, and adaptability? If the answer is yes, then you're on the right track. Cool. I have a podcast. So by all means, if you're interested in hearing, there's actually a lot of students. I've interviewed a number of OCSA students who have gone on to different programs to hear their journey, right? Oh, I really thought I wanted this BFA in musical theater, but then I found theater education, and here I went on this path. Or there's lots of different stories that can sort of give you ideas of the many pathways forward. And I did want to just sort of name, I'm doing some open houses this month. By all means, they're free, they're welcome. I'm going to continue basically this conversation, as well as sort of discussing what my business does and how I can help folks. It's on Zoom. I try to keep it light, I try to keep it fun, and try to give clean and clear information that can help you on your path. So I also say this is a no sale zone, it's just a place to come get information. Yeah. And then with that, let's sort of open this up for Q&A. How long did I go? I have no idea. Did I hit it? Yeah. Do you have any questions? And the mic's right there.
All at once.
I'm totally new to this process. I'll just push it. What is the Common App?
Oh,
I don't know what that is.
beautiful. Okay, this is a great question. New to this, what is the Common App? I'm so glad you asked. Because this is different from I'll say from my generation when we had paper applications. It's entirely different. Common Application is a platform that almost every college uses. So basically the beauty of Common App, and OCSA uses Common App all the time, it's very common. You'll get sort of even walked through this process when you get into that junior, senior year moment. But it's basically a one-stop shop for applications. It's kind of the easiest way to do it. There is the literal common part of the Common Application where you put in your biographical information, the parent information, the essay that would go to all of the different schools, different sort of general questions that then go to every school you end up applying to, as well as you sort of pick, let's say you're applying to 10 schools. You put those 10 schools into your portal, and then you answer their questions individually. And what I love about Common App more than anything, it will not let you submit if you haven't answered every question. It's magic in that regard. But it does, here at OCSA, it communicates with Naviance. And the beauty of that is that it sort of like syncs everything in terms of your counselor recommendations, your school reports, your letters of rec, as well as any transcript and information. It all sort of like communicates really easily and beautifully. So the good news is you can actually sign up for Common App now. You can actually sign up. They will not allow you to apply early, right? So you'll sort of be in like what I sort of call like a Common App purgatory, but you can really like see how the app works. I would say it's relatively user-friendly. It's not too dire. It's not too difficult, but it does take a little getting used to navigating the different tabs.
And you start working with the counselors in junior year, filling all that out?
Well,
initially?
so to get like super technical, you can open up a Common App at any point. OCSA will sort of like, if I'm not mistaken, OCSA will guide and will offer some like programming and information about how to walk through the Common App. Truth is, you cannot actually start, if you're applying in the fall of your senior year, you can't start your application until August 1st. So basically on August 1st, there's a big turnover for the next year's admissions cycle. So you can get to practicing and start building out information well before that, but no, you really can't get started formally applying until August 1st, leading into the senior year. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
Yeah, but I would highly recommend getting on it. There's also, there is a way to become I think the term is an advisor. Yeah, it's an advisor. I do this with any of my clients, where and a parent can do this. You can become an advisor on a student's application. Therefore, you can see everything that's been filled out thus far, but you can't change a thing. But you can help identify. It's a great place to be able to proofread, to sort of measure twice, cut once, make sure things are on the level. Different students are going to be more prone and open to having their parents looking at it or not. So cross that bridge as you see fit with your student. But there's a lot of really cool options in Common App. The other thing that happens is as you start to put in your information, depending on your settings, schools will then start to contact you. They will start to see your sort of like stats, and if you are a good candidate for the school, often they will say like, hey, you seem like a great candidate. Apply to our school, with no application fee. So there are some other perks about being on that sort of platform that you can start to get some really cool information. And you can also do a lot of research about the schools. Every school has its own sort of like homepage.
A question from the chat.
Yeah.
How important is a coach, and do most people do this?
How important is a coach? Fully acknowledging, I am a coach. I'm gonna put this out there. Here's what I will say, and I truly mean it. I am a luxury. I am not a necessity. I am a luxury. I am not a necessity. So with that, I don't think it is mandatory. That being said, much like when we got to this earlier moment, if there are aspects of this process that you don't know, getting support is not a bad idea. Now, that does not mean you need to get a full comprehensive coach either, where you're sort of start to finish. There are ways to sort of spot check this, get some additional help. Millions of people apply to college without coaches. I will say, we make your life easier. So that's why I like to name, I am a luxury, not a necessity.
And one more question from the chat.
And I'll head over here.
Are you familiar
I
with?
wanted
Oh.
to comment on that.
Yes, by all means.
I just went through the process. I swear I'm not a plant. And if there are varying price points for
Yes.
an outside counselor, and the OCSA counselors are so hardworking and so amazing, but they can only do so much. They have a very specific role and they do an excellent job. And it's a very technical role. So to have an outsider, I will tell you that it helps your relationship with your child hugely, because they see them more as a professional. You're very close to them. And even the most organized, remarkably intelligent parents, I have watched their relationship with their child crumble because the stakes are so high and they're so emotionally involved. A third party can give advice in a professional way, in an organized, experienced way that allows you to keep being a parent and to support them in that way. It's really worthwhile if you can afford it, and there are different price points. So I think it's a very worthy investment. I would highly recommend it as a parent that just went through it.
And I would highly recommend Scott. Because we went through it with Scott, and he made the process so not stressful. Daniel is going back to college tonight, and
Get out of here, kid.
yeah. But it was never a I don't want to meet with Scott today. Never was that. It was always, okay, Sunday is Scott Day. Sunday is our day that we work with Scott. And I didn't read an essay. I wasn't a part of this. But yet Scott was also there for me when you sign up for him and you pick your time frame, and he would say, what do you want from this meeting? And one day it was just like, I'm having a mom moment. And he spent that time with me as well as Daniel. Most of it was with Daniel, but because as a parent, you hear all the stuff from the parents as well, and that becomes stressful, but it also becomes an education, because some people, hey, I just heard you can bargain for your price of college, wait, what's that? And, tell me about that, Scott. And I also saw the stress of people going through it, and the parents going through it. And I remember when Daniel was a junior, and all of his senior friends that I was really close with the moms, and I saw their stress, and went, I can't do that. He can't do that. Scott, if we can do this together with you, and whatever the timeline is, can we push it up a month or two? Because I know there's gonna be things that happen. You get sick, the shows, finals, things are gonna happen, and he does not work well doing things at the last minute. I didn't go through this process. I didn't go to college. I want the best opportunity for him. So for us, it was the best investment, and he just made it. He's magical. You're magical. So.
Well, thank you. I did not intend for
I
that.
she wasn't a winner.
I will take it, but I guess to that earlier question, it's a very valid point in terms of why the investment and why is it worthwhile. And I really do believe it is actually that piece is allowing the parent to stay the parent and to give this sort of third party ability to navigate this and mitigate any sort of conflict or issues or mitigate conversations. So
We got one more online question.
yeah.
Yes. So are you familiar with the SCOIR app? SCOIR? And is it comparable to Common App? Are there limitations?
It's comparable. I think I've had one client use it. I would say if you're an OCSA family, plan on the Common App because it's so seamlessly integrated. That's sort of my general point of view. And there shouldn't be any issue otherwise. Yeah.
Regarding the exam PSAT, do they need to take the other exams too, or just PSAT now? One exam?
It depends. It depends on so the question is, do they need to take the PSAT? Highly recommend it.
Well, I'm saying, do they need to take other exams too? There are others, you said.
It will depend on the schools that they're applying to. There are now schools that will require the SAT or the ACT. Other schools really like an SAT or ACT, and many schools, it's totally up to you one way or the other. So it really starts to become a case-by-case situation, whether or not, if your student is a good test taker, I would highly recommend taking both the PSAT and the SAT or the ACT, depending on which one they fare better. If your student is not a good test taker, there are ways to go through this process without taking either. But again, sort of to the point earlier, there are a lot of sort of scholarship opportunities and things to sort of consider by having taken the PSAT and also even the SAT. So It's just sort of, there's not a blanket answer to that. It's really case by case. Yeah, here, and then I'll head back over here.
How does early decision work with the creatives since they have like that audition and callback step?
Very good question. I will say, and I'm not embarrassed to say this, early decision drives me bonkers. Early decision drives me bonkers. One, because it's actually not that great for the student. It's great for the school, not great for the student. Because early decision, if you're not aware what that is, you apply early, but it is a binding contract. Essentially, early decision is different than early action. Early decision is, I apply to the school and they offer me a place in the school, I then must go to that school before you know all the data and information. That being said, and this varies major to major and it varies program to program. So I'm going to do my best to give a general answer, but particularly for performing arts with auditions. You're kind of on an early decision, early action timeline without the benefit of hearing back early. So you are not actually technically on an early action or early deadline school. There's a handful of programs that do participate in early decision and have early auditions specifically for that. Those auditions are usually in November, December, and I think of like NYU or a Boston University. And with early decision, you do have a greater chance of getting admission. Like the admission numbers tend to be higher. If like NYU, this is a general number, NYU is 9% admit rates. Tisch early decision 1 might be 30%. You know what I mean? Of that pool of humans. My big thing, if a student decides to do early decision, you have got to be ride or die for that school. That's just sort of my take. And I've worked with students who've gone through ED, and I had students this year who have gone through ED and are admitted, and then they're sort of done, which is actually really, that's sort of like the benefits. But the hard part for really rigorous performing arts majors is they really don't offer early decision. It's not a common offering. Partly because they have to go through the whole audition process and they want to sort of look at the entire pool and not separate out via early decision, early action, regular decision.
And then how does like the scholarships for the performing arts work versus?
So similar to like almost any school, when you apply to the school, most of your institutional merit scholarship is coming from admissions. What I sort of see by and large is the bulk of those are going to be more academic than artistic. The artistic scholarships can generally be smaller. You don't see a lot of students who, similar to like sports or other sort of academic purposes, you're not hearing a lot of like, my kid got a full ride to be, an oboe major. Like that's not really a huge thing. That's usually coming more from an academic or side thing. But every school and every institution is, again, a little bit different. So sometimes you're considered for scholarships just by having auditioned and just by having submitted an application. Others will have you sort of look at honors colleges or sort of honors admissions to add some additional merit aid. If you're looking for aid, do not underestimate honors colleges. Like applying to a school and then applying to their honors college. If they can get admitted to the honors college, often they get preferential treatment, preferential scheduling for classes, and often huge additional scholarships. And then you'll sort of generally see the talent is sort of like a tag. It's sort of like an add-on based on admission. So that's where it really does vary year by year. And what I have seen with these sort of impacted programs, smaller programs, like, I have a lot of experience in musical theater. So these programs that are like 20 people, in a freshman class. If you get admitted to more than one program, there is actually room for negotiation. There is. That varies, again, school by school, program by program, but often department heads will have some either discretionary funds that they're trying to protect their yield, right? They want you to say yes. And so if they kick in an extra 5K and that's gonna make you say yes, often they may have the ability to do that. So it's one of those things when you get the financial aid package, you really do wanna compare your top options, and it may be worth talking to a program head or a financial aid office, or depending on, the school will sort of navigate you accordingly. They have had this conversation many times before, they'll have this conversation many times again. My point of view on this, do it respectfully, do it without expectation, but also make the ask. Because the worst thing that could happen is they say, nope, your package is your package. But there may be some wiggle room.
And
which
then
is
does
fine.
your counseling help with that piece?
Yes and no. I will say I'm not a financial aid expert by any stretch. I'm an admissions expert, but I'm not a financial aid expert. But I can guide you through the process, specifically through the negotiating process, knowing like, oh yeah, that school's gonna be a little more likely to budge than this school. In that I can certainly help guide from a general point of view, but I always wanna be clear, like financial aid is like scholarship research. I can help on a general point of view, but that's not my expertise. Yeah.
Thank you so much. We have just one more question. We're running a little bit over time, so to be respectful of everyone's time, hopefully you can hang out if anyone else has more questions, but we promise this gentleman here one more, and then we'll wrap.
Real quick, 3 things. First of all,
Real quick, 3. Wait, are these wait, is this a question though?
No,
or is this
it's not
a
question.
I'd actually love to get a question, my friend.
Okay.
I want to answer questions, but I would love for you to share this information. Can you share that briefly?
Okay. First of all, test resources, public libraries, practice tests all the time.
Love it.
Trust the process, because you can force it, and I'm sure Scott will agree with me. You can force it, you can put your kid into a school that they're not happy with. Trust the process. The admissions counselors are looking to put an entire class together holistically, and that's where the profile of your student will be identified and fit. Lastly, financial aid. We live in California. We have different needs than most of the students in the rest of the nation. If you present it in a very respectful way, most financial aid offices will take that stuff into account,
Yep.
which the Common App and financial aid apps do not. So always ask.
Yeah.
And this is coming from experience.
Love this.
So,
Let
thank you.
me answer one more question, and then we'll wrap it.
So I kind of heard that with athletes and arts, they're kind of looked at a little differently than like the general. So do you have, coming from OCSA, do you have to major or minor in an art to be kind of considered in that? Or can you pick a different major, like a chemistry major or something, but you still have the arts background and still look different? Or do you have to?
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, I actually want you to really understand, like, it's from the OSHA point of view. So, like, there's sort of a misconception at OSHA with a lot of students where they feel like, well, if I don't study this art form, then I will have wasted 6 years. And you're like, no. It's actually what's gonna make you an amazing STEM major, or what's gonna make you an amazing doctor. And often what the goal is, if they have another interest, right? Let's say they wanna go, I worked with a creative writing student last year who wanted to go biochem. I was like, okay, I don't want to go into biochem, but I'm glad you do. And so it was actually about folding into their application their stories, their interest in Dungeons and Dragons, the things that make them a great writer, and actually pitching to these biochem majors. My creative brain makes me, wrote this fabulous essay about being a mad scientist and defining what being a mad scientist is to them, right? So it's actually about taking the human in front of you, and if they have another interest, how can you fold those interests towards, where is the overlap? And really selling that within the application. But no, from the admission side of things, they love an OSHA student. They love an artistic student, someone who's a little more extroverted, someone who's a little better self-expressed. With a student like that, say if they're going on a real stretch that they don't have a lot of stuff on their resume that sort of supports it, one thing I would sort of highly recommend if the school offers it is an interview. For the OSHA student, I'm like, if you can get into an interview, do it. If they really consider the interview as part of the process. So that way they can sort of plead their case to an admissions officer. They can really, and that's, I see all the time where a student or an admissions officer will like, oh, I didn't get it on paper, but now I get it, now that I'm talking to you. So that would be another sort of avenue. But the other thing to sort of consider would then be like maybe open curriculum programs. Schools that sort of give you sort of like self-built majors. Students who are sort of like really spiky in multiple different ways tend to do really well in open curriculum places, because then you can go take a music performance class and, you know, a biochem class, right? But yeah, I would not be fearful. Having gone to OSHA does not mean you have to major in that art form. Maybe it's a club at the school, or like I have dancers who are like, I want to go study psychology, but I'm going to be on the dance team. Like that's just as valid a way to go through this process, and then you don't have to do the audition piece. I'm always like, how easy can this be? It will be easier if they just do an academic application.
So,
Cool.
so great. Thank you all for coming. Thank you for your time, such a wealth of knowledge. If you have any other topics or any other things that are interesting, obviously this one was very well received. Please let us know, send us a message on Instagram, and we'll try and get some of those topics in our next chat. But thank you guys so much. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you. Get out.
I was like, all right, bye. See you later. I need to take a picture of it. No.
I do. And UK and Canada, but I can certainly do research, but I also
I talked to I went up to him and I was like, listen.
So what I always do is like I'll
Email, and he was like, February something. I was like, no.
Am I really
Done.
right now? And I'll be honest, I will talk about.
Yeah, is that the one?